One of the things that often boggles my mind when it comes to salespeople is the nature of the way that a lot of you will sell will be through intuition, gut, and of course, playback by playback responses in terms of the conversations that you have. And you can see your own progress, and it translates into, for example, number of leads generated, number of appointments booked, number of ultimately deals closed, and that's all fine and that's all well, but you're missing a significant piece of the puzzle, because what happens in those situations and circumstances is you're only relying upon your own level of ultimately intuition, reflection, but not actually any systematic based evidence. It's the difference between a football player being asked, imagine that you're Cristiano Ronaldo and you're being asked, how do you think you played? And Cristiano Ronaldo and any indeed footballer will have a good sense of where they think their issues were and where they think their problems were. But imagine the heightened elevation that you get if you have the playback from your actual game and you're able to play it back alongside a professional, because it's the professional's role to see all of the things that you didn't see. But even in playing it back for yourself, because you have a second pass to look over your actual reflection upon something, it then becomes devoid of all emotion and all sentiment. And what tends to happen when we think about fighting or beating the new monster or the new badass on Donkey Kong is that we remember all of the moves that we use to defeat that enemy, but we don't then totally always know if there is or was a systematic way that we approach to actually beat that enemy, and or we don't realize all of the unnecessary moves that we made in order to beat the enemy. So where are all of the, if you have a 17 move combo that you've perfected, could you actually, through the process of reflection, narrow it down to 13 moves? And the problem with not having that reflective, ultimately, system, okay, because we're not talking now about intuition, we're not talking about your own mental reflections, and we're not talking about ultimately success as born of omission. So by omitting, because you're omitting the memory of all of your mistakes, all of your missteps, or you're only relying upon your memory because there's no kept documented record, you're ultimately omitting key inefficiencies with the way that you actually sell. And it just harms you in so many ways. So there's this concept of ultimately documenting the work that we do. And to some degree, there's always some kind of breadcrumb trail. Okay. So for example, in our company, we'll use, and many sales teams will know this, you'll have a sales CRM, and multiple sales CRMs will have fundamentally options to record calls. And then those calls intermittently get played back and shared around the sales team, especially when someone has a good call. Of course, they share their victories because that's what you'll ultimately always share. But then what doesn't get a documented is, are you keeping a log that exists outside of that system, keeping a log of all of your victories? So you can go back and review the victories, and you can review the victories with people that exist outside of the system, because the system's a very limited space, really. If you think about your own sales CRM and 600 people have got, irrespective of the access, who are the people that are actually easily able to access data? And who are the people then therefore likely to review that data? So actually, when it comes to reviewing sales calls, one of the key things is that accessibility is everything, because everyone is inundated with an abundance of ultimately data. So changing accessibility to make the accessibility as easy as possible can actually have a definite change on your sales skills, because a simple thing such as taking all of your, and this is the first piece, right? If you're a sales rep, you're a sales director, you're a team director, why wouldn't you? And we've got two sides of our business. We've got ultimately the inbound sales team who do selling through Zoom, Google Meet, Teams. So they'll have, for example, 30, 40-minute recorded calls. And then we'll have the outbound team who'll make dials. It'll be via some type of VoIP system, and there'll be those calls. Now, the nature of those calls are different in length, but same in intent with a view to focus. But in both cases, unless and until more recently we began to set up a system, no one was really making full use of the fact that calls are recorded because there's so much opportunity that you get from that. And with the actual tools that we have today, there's no excuse or no reason why you shouldn't not just allow the system to record them for you. So when you hop onto a VoIP system, it will often record the call for you. When you hop onto a video and audio based system, you can often just hit one click and record. But what are you doing with the content? What are you doing with the data? Are you systematically actually capturing it and documenting it? So for example, simple examples of that could be, why not pull 50 transcripts from your calls and ask AI to analyze all of the issues with the way that you sell? Because then you'll be able to spot, the AI will spot patterns that you don't see. And all of the value that you miss that's left on the table is all of the things that you don't see. And if accessibility is an issue, then you never really develop, or actually the constraint upon your development is what you can remember. And we never develop the areas that we're unaware that even need development because you don't notice it. It takes an expert with an outside view to say, do you realize that every time you hop onto a sales call, you always start with this tick saying, do you have 5 minutes to speak? And 30% of the time, you're getting a no. And you might go 10 years of doing that, 2 years of doing that, 100 dials, 1,000 dials, and never realize that, you know what? I don't even have alternative, robust data to experiment to even accurately answer whether I could reduce the amount of initial no's that I would get from 30% to 15% because I never realized that before. Because that was something that I don't see. So different people have different ways of looking at the same thing, which is why there's value in having an active feedback loop. It's why also, for me, as, for example, a business owner, one of the ways that we've succeeded in my small or short time as a SEO agency owner, people used to laugh about it, and I still do it now because I'll put a post out on Facebook, I'll put a post out on X. So we generate 500 inquiries a month inbound and growing. And we have SEO agencies that come to us and want help with lead generation. I've got friends who are agency owners and they're all struggling to build businesses. They bounce between 9 to 5, and then they do their 5 to 9, which is growing their second business, which is their agency or their freelancing, and or they've got some semblance of a small business, but they struggle to take it from 5, 6, 7 figures. I've had my accountant, Varun, I love you, man, but we always laugh about the fact that you said this business isn't going to work. People don't make money from marketing and lead generation. Everyone outsources it to India, and they only have a value of it of $300 a month. But I was one of the few people, or only people in my circle, and I don't say it with arrogance, I say it with honesty, who had the level of humility to understand that, well, I don't know what I don't know. So what I would do, and I still do, I invite SEOs to come and look at my website and tear through all of the stupid stuff that we're doing wrong that I didn't even realize. That I'd become so blind to that even though it was in front of me, there were either previous lessons that had since been forgotten, or new things that had changed, or new ways of looking at the same thing that caused me to evolve my processes. It's a reason that we have a company today. It's a reason that we've been able to bounce back through COVID and still have $100,000 plus month and still be growing at a rapid clip where we're going from. We've gone from 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 inquiries a month. It's the reason why today we're actually able to have three full-time sales reps, which isn't a lot, but 3 that singularly exist through inbound leads and inbound lead inquiries. We're having a 4th come on, and that's not a common thing. So none of these guys get any of their pipeline through any outbound activity we do. I'm not talking, so I mean they're not existing from paid media or from outbound lead generation. It's all from people coming to the website. So the real question is, what was a big part of how I got there? I was one of the only people that I know who had the humility to come and get my arsehole ripped out, because every month I would go to someone who I respected in this community. I say, have a look at my stuff. Have a look at my stuff. Have a look at the way that I ultimately do SEO. Have a look at. I've had our managing director now presently, Eon, come and review my sales calls in the beginning, because he came with a background of 20 years of selling, and I didn't have 20 years of selling previous to coming into Pearl Lemon. So upon him joining, and because I saw the sales he was bringing in, I asked him to help train me, even though I was still selling, because even within the 90% of things that Eon taught me or told me that perhaps I already knew, there's always that 10%. There's always that sliver. And it's all of those slivers in combination that can generate the outsized result. So that's why it's really important to catalog all your actual sales calls to ensure that you have it in an easily accessible place. And then it just opens up your ability to do an after action replay where you can intermittently look back at ultimately some of your sales calls, and you have a historical record. I mean, since the beginning of the whole business, record exclusively almost all of my calls. So I have over 100, 200 sales calls that are on YouTube. To be honest with you, they're scattered across SoundCloud, across YouTube. But because I made that effort to put them in platforms where they could be recorded, it meant that, for example, our legacy CRM system, Crazy Call, when it disappeared, I didn't lose all my calls. I didn't lose my best calls. I also had some of my bad calls. And now some of the new people coming in still are listening to calls that I made 4 years ago. And they're actually highlighting things that probably they would tweak now. So there's just so many ways it offers opportunities for learning. And then when you can take your 10 most recent sales calls, you put it into a playlist that's publicly accessible. You can then pull the transcripts, ask AI to ultimately spot all of the weaknesses, the inconsistencies. How many times am I using a filler word? What additional questions am I missing? You can then, and there will soon come, the ability for AI to do sentiment analysis, where it can listen to the tone of voice. It can listen to the pauses in conversation. You can ask the AI. Of course, you can ask humans, tell me all the things that I don't see. You know what? Let me just pay someone $20, $30, $100. Let me not pay anyone, because there's no shortage of sales consultants in the marketplace that are trying to build their own, ultimately, case studies that could review your stuff. And it's the fastest way to improve, because then you get that very specific tactical level of insight that you might need to spend 10 hours going through YouTube tutorials to discover. But then also, when you're doing things in isolation, you're always limited by the constraint that is you, because it's what you take out from it. And actually, you might be taking the completely wrong thing from that sales process or from that sales literature, because what we tend to always do, all of us, is work on the things that we're already strong at. And because most of us don't test, much like, for example, if you think about the academic process, people don't tend to work upon their weaknesses. A classic example in the British language, for people that are native English, we struggle to learn second languages. We struggle to learn third languages. And a common part of that is that when you grow up speaking English as your native language, you don't tend to learn grammar. So one of the struggles that I have, for example, is that when now currently, as I go on my journey to attempt to learn Italian, and there's so much grammar that's at the foundation of how Italian is communicated, that when people, or when my Italian tutor talks so casually about possessive verbs and nouns and adjectives and the subject and the object and the verb, I get confused, because I never took the time to understand that they were my weaknesses. And I forgot that they were my weaknesses because I tend to move towards my strengths. And that was because I didn't set up a system to allow someone to come in and say, Deepak, tap, 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 you're still making this basic mistake when it comes to how to learn languages. Or Deepak, tap, 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 why are you guys doing this? Or why are you do so if you're a salesperson and you're listening, you are going to develop. You are going to grow through on-the-job training in terms of just making the dials. You are going to learn through the books and the YouTube tutorials, but there's a quite easy and way easier manner than you think to get real tactical insights when it comes to the way that you sell. And it just begins by not just recording, because a lot of the stuff is already recorded today, but people don't do anything with it. And they don't capture it. They don't say, you know what? I did a good job of uploading every sales call that I have. If you're a cold caller, for example, imagine the value that you would get if you just got into the process. And once you have the process down, it's not even hard. You download the sales call from the CRM, you upload it onto any audio or visual platform, even a Google Drive, whatever, it doesn't matter. But imagine that you had every sales call that was over 3 minutes, whether it was yes or no, for every day, even 2 a day, for a month. And that you were able to give that data set to a sales consultant, to a friend, or to imagine the value that you would get from the feedback. Imagine what ongoing impact that would create in your actual sales ability. And 90% of the salespeople that I meet don't even do that. The pattern of the top performers is that they do, because otherwise you are victim to making same mistakes time and time again. And that's why you need to have multiple mechanisms for coaching in place. And this is a very cost-effective way to get continuous levels of coaching. And it just begins with having that historical record and then being able to go back through it, or having someone to go back through it. And you'll begin to get very tactical in-field insights as to what your specific problems are. And then it will massively amplify the level of your evolution, because it's all about especially as you become more competent. When you become more competent and you reach a place of a pretty decent standard, it's all about the small things. It's all about the tweaks. It's all about a specific sequence in a specific sequence that you use to catalog words. So rather than have you got 30 seconds to speak, instead of it being have you got 30 seconds to speak, Frank? It could just be Frank, in less than 30 seconds, I'm going to explain to you why you're going to be incredibly excited by the time we get off this phone call. And that might lead to more openers. There might be a simple way of flipping the same words around that creates 25% more yeses. So these kinds of tactical insights that, well, you know what, George, I just noticed that when you open a call up, you say, do you mind if I take 30 seconds to walk you through what we offer at Pearl Lemon? Instead of you saying that, it might be a case of, hey, George, so my name's Frank. Look, in less than 30 seconds, I'm going to explain to you why working with our team at Pearl Lemon might change the entire shape of your business. Can I walk you through it? So something as simple as that, which is exactly the same message, but flipped, could be the difference. And you're never going to get that from the YouTubes. You're never going to get that from ultimately the books, because it's so tactical and so specific to you, which is why you need to take your video or your voice note or your transcriptions and call recordings, and you need them analyzed. Because otherwise you never learn the little things that can often make the huge difference with your sales ability.